the aging of the rest of the body, it wouldn't surprise me at all if it was right behind the central nervous system. I think it's that powerful that you can have the musculoskeletal system leapfrog most of the other systems in the body and be one of the slowest aging if you use it the way you did when you were 8 years old. That would not surprise me one bit. Now, as an example here, I have, this is not a client, it's not anyone affiliated with, this is at Train with Joan on Instagram. I follow her because she inspires me. Joan's story is she got into weightlifting. She has a bodybuilding daughter and son-in-law, I believe. She got into weightlifting at 70 years old. That's the photo on the left. And she was, on medications, out of shape, had not ever stepped foot in a gym. Picture on the right is 77 years old. So 7 years later, she's a fitness model. She's been on the cover of magazines. She has a big Instagram following if you want to check her out. I find that very inspiring. She posts her workouts and she does serious weightlifting. She's strong. But it all started with her deciding to try at 7 years old something new. And so even with 7 decades of not using her body, with it adapting to a sedentary lifestyle, weak joints, weak bones, weak muscles, even with all that inertia, she was able to become this fit, strong, healthy person. And she's still improving to this day. In fact, it was very, very inspiring. I want to say about 9 months ago, she shared a story about how she likes to cycle and she was in a bicycle accident and she felt pretty badly. She was bruised up. I think she had a black eye, she had a sprained wrist and all that, but she didn't break any bones at 77 years old. I think that is remarkable and fantastic. And she went on to talk about, like, if this had happened to me 10 years ago when I was 67, I probably would have shattered multiple bones and been laid up in a hospital and then had poor physical function after that. Probably would have skipped my rehab, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it goes to show you that not only is she younger and healthier at 77 than she was at 70, but she has a more resilient, safer body so that when she's out being active, having fun with her daughter and son-in-law and whoever else, her friends, even if she gets bumps and bruises, scrapes, it's far less of a serious issue than it would have been were she 10 years younger, but less musculoskeletally fit. So that's the good news, is our musculoskeletal system is so adaptive, we can get it to do what we want when we want. Now, this is true at every age. So there's a lot of questions like, but I'm 60, but I'm 70, but I'm 80. Is it too late for me? It's never too late is the answer to that question. So what we see here is, this is a great 12-week study. And it looked at, does resistance training work for older adults, age 65 to 75, and for the very old, which is 85 plus in this category. That's how they defined it. Turns out it does. And not only that, but you might look at these numbers. The group in the 85 plus category actually had better results than the group in the 65 to 70 category. They gained more muscle, they gained more strength, and they improved their performance more, almost twice as much in terms of performance, than the older adults. Now, I would argue, it's obvious they were probably starting from a little lower place if they were average 85 plus. So they had more to gain back. But this shows how robustly at any age your musculoskeletal system can respond if you give it the right stimulus. There's no sell-by date. There's no deadline where, nope, doesn't work for you anymore. It is always going to work. And honestly, if you're starting from a lower point, it's going to work better. If I'm an elite bodybuilder and I start resistance training and I gain 1%, I'm excited because I'm already at this upper level. I've been doing it for a long time. If someone starts way down here at the very bottom, you can't see my hands, but that's fine. If someone starts way down low in terms of what they're able to do and what they're confident in doing, you're going to see massive improvements. Your body hasn't made those adaptations yet, or if it did a long time ago and lost them, it's going to gain them back. So this tissue, it's really, honestly, it can be miraculous how much you can change your body, how much that can change your life and your prognosis and your physical outcomes based on what you do. And every other system in the body is going to respond to the things you do. Like I mentioned earlier, everything is adaptive, but nothing comes close to this adaptive. And so we can leverage that. We can get to work, and it doesn't take that much. So if you see here, low volume exercise program, 2 to 3 hours a week regarding resistance training is enough to elicit these changes. 12 weeks, 2 to 3 hours a week. These people were much healthier. They bumped themselves into different categories of risk for chronic diseases, for physical function, everything. And what's great as well is structural changes that you make when you resistance train or when you improve your musculoskeletal system, structural changes that you make persist. They take time to adapt, not a ton of time. 12 weeks is not that long. But there's a follow-up study here where they took people exercising 3 times a week for 12 weeks. And then following that, they had them do a layoff period for 12 weeks, only doing once a week. And they didn't gain any more muscle, but they didn't lose any either. And so what that means is we work hard, we put in time, 3 hours a week, which is not a massive investment. We have 168 hours every week. 3 hours a week, though, you gain a bunch of strength, you gain a bunch of muscle, and you're like, oh no, if I get busy or I get sick or I travel something, this is all going to be for nothing. I'm going to lose it. That's not true. It just takes the slightest amount of regular stimulation for your body to say, no, we better keep this. And that's true of people with bed rest. They've treated people with bed rest as well. A couple hours a week can almost completely prevent the atrophy you would normally see in bed rest, which is rapid, even in the very young. Bed rest can cause rapid muscle loss, but a little bit of resistance exercise, 1 hour, 2 hours a week, can completely negate that. So it does not take a lot. And particularly if you built muscle, built strength, it doesn't take a lot to maintain it. It takes more to build it. You have to do more. You have to stress your body and get it to adapt further. But in terms of maintaining it, it's very easy. It's a minimal commitment, and the benefits are just phenomenal. So there's really no reason not to. You can start at any age, you can benefit at any point. Now, athleticism, and I'm using that as a blanket term, because remember, our physical capacities that deteriorate the fastest are muscle power, balance, and muscle strength. I'm calling that athleticism, even though, you could argue what that term means to different people, like it's like athletic coaches and things. I'm going to call that athleticism. It saves lives. The more physically capable you keep your body or build your body up to be, the less diseases you're going to have, the longer you're going to live. And I would absolutely argue the better your quality of life will be, your health span, because you're going to have better physical performance. The things you can choose to do with your time is open wide. You can do sports, you can do hiking, you can do different kind of adventure things, you can travel. Your body's just more adaptive and resilient and ready for anything. Also, like Joan with her fall on her bike, you can handle setbacks and come back strong much more quickly. So there's just going to be a whole myriad of benefits. Now, some examples of how we could say athleticism saves lives is grip strength. I don't know if you guys listened to my lecture last year, but it was all about how important strength training is for long-term health, for longevity. I mentioned this, grip strength is actually a better predictor of all-cause mortality than blood pressure. Blood pressure is one of the gold standard metrics. Generally, people, as their blood pressure goes up, their risk of all diseases and an early death goes up. But it turns out having a weak grip is even more predictive of that. And the reverse is true too. If you have a strong grip, it predicts that you're going to have a longer, healthier life, which is fascinating to me. And it's not that there's some magic in the hands, or at least not, I don't think so. It's that a strong grip correlates with a stronger, healthier body. People that do things have stronger hands, and therefore they have healthier bodies. Muscle power, as predicted by the sit to stand test. And this test is easy. You measure for 30 seconds. How many times can you sit down in a chair and stand back up? So springier, more powerful muscles will give you a better score on this test. People who score better on this test have a lower predicted fall risk than either walking speed or strength. So I just mentioned how predictive strength is, in this case, grip strength, how predictive it is for mortality risk, and muscle power. And we're talking specifically about falls, but I would argue that, definitely reaches other systems. Muscle power is a better predictor of fall risk than strength or walking speed. So people who walk faster at their normal casual walking speed tend to be healthier than people who have to walk more slowly. And of course, there's limitations there, like gait or handicaps, things like that. But by and large, people who walk faster tend to be healthier. But even when you compare walking speed and strength, both of which are excellent metrics for risk of various problems, muscle power was a better predictor. So again, we want to have these powerful, quick, springy, reactive muscles. That's a sign of youth and vigor and health. Single leg balance test. And I mentioned this earlier. This is just stand on one leg, time yourself. How long can you do it? How wobbly are you? How soon do you have to grab something? Strongly correlates with all-cause mortality. And that shouldn't be surprising. If you have strong, stable legs, I mentioned the different rates of muscle loss in our body. If our thighs are strong, if our hip stabilizers and flexors are strong, it's going to be a piece of cake to balance. If these things are weak because we've been sedentary, it's not going to be so easy, especially if we're carrying a lot of extra weight. It's going to be very challenging. And that's going to predict that we're not doing so well in terms of long-term health. So athleticism, if we're talking about strength, muscle power, and balance, when I say athleticism, absolutely saves lives. Work on these things, improve these test scores, and keep your body healthy. You will live longer. You will be healthier. Now, I've talked a lot about muscle power. I've talked a lot about athleticism, balance, the musculoskeletal system in general. How do we improve it? It's really important. I made that point. You get it. How do we improve power in particular? Now, granted, all these things help everything else. If your balance gets better, it's going to be easier to have good muscle power. If your strength gets better, you're going to have more power and more muscle mass. So these things feed into each other. But right here, I'm mostly focusing on muscle power because that was the most rapidly lost physical capacity that people saw over time. And it's very diagnostic of everything else going poorly if you lose it. So there are 4 ways that I'd say anyone can easily focus more on their muscle power. Remember, muscle power is force plus speed, force generated quickly. So if you have a traditional strength training regimen, let's say you go down to the YMCA twice a week and you do the machine circuit where you lift weights on the machines, that's awesome. Please keep doing that. That's really good for your health. The only change you have to make in order to make it more power focused is accelerate on the concentric phase. So when you're lifting the weight, try and accelerate the weight, speed it up. Be safe. Don't go necessarily your full speed, especially if you're just starting out, especially if you're an older adult or you have some sort of at-risk situation like, surgery, injuries, chronic conditions. But work on accelerating that weight. Don't just lift it smoothly. Try and make it speed up as you go. If you go through a few workouts and you have no problems, work towards accelerating as hard as you can, maybe over a 4 to 6 week period. Get to that point where you're doing the same weight, but you're doing it faster. Now for the eccentric, this is the lowering portion of the weight, could be machine, could be free weight, doesn't matter. Definitely do that slow and controlled. The eccentric is very, very beneficial for stability, for improving neural connections with your muscle spindles and your muscle cells. That's where your brain talks to your muscles. That makes that connection better. So you get more coordinated, you get more control. So you want to be thoughtful. You want to keep tension on the muscles for that lowering phase. And what I make all my clients do in the gym, what I just did for 7 hours now, is I have a mandatory pause at the bottom of every rep. So that ensures that we're not bouncing. We're not using any kind of tendon ligament slack to bounce that weight back up. We're pausing, we're controlling it, and then we're using pure muscle strength to accelerate that resistance back up. Again, this works for body weight. This works for if you were doing push-ups or lunges. You can also go down slow, pause, and accelerate on the upstroke. It works no matter what. So you can easily integrate it into any strength training you're already doing that way. Option number 2 for improving power and improving this athleticism is accommodating resistance. Accommodating resistance is just fancy fitness speak for the weight is not the same the whole way. It changes as you go. So typically that's done with resistance bands or chains. If you have like a more hardcore weightlifting gym, there's chains. I wish they were everywhere because they're pretty cool. But if you think about if I have a bar and instead of weights on each side of the bar, I have resistance bands attached to the bar and I'm lifting it up and the bands are getting stretched as I lift it. The farther I stretch that band, those bands, the more resistance they are pulling down on that bar with. So instead of it being 10 pounds at the bottom and 10 pounds at the top, it might be half that at the bottom, maybe 5 pounds, but it could be 15 or 20 pounds at the top because I've stretched that band so much further. That, from your muscles perspective, mimics acceleration. So instead of just having 10 pounds of force all the way up as you're lifting that weight, the muscle has to push harder and harder and harder to get that weight to keep going up. And that's what it's doing when it's accelerating. It's pushing harder and harder to get weights to speed up. So you can take a normal resistance and you can accelerate hard, or you can use accommodating resistance. And I would argue still try to accelerate it. But your muscles see that the same. When they have to produce more and more force during a repetition, that to them means acceleration. Chains work the same way. I don't know, vast majority of people will not have access to chains. It's just a metal chain you hang from a weight. And it's the same idea. As you lift the weight, more and more links of the chain are pulled up off the ground. The weight gets heavier. As you lower the weight, more and more chain lays down on the ground. The weight gets lighter. So same exact idea. You're forcing your muscle to work harder the higher you lift the weight, and your muscle thinks it's accelerating because of that increased force demand. So accommodating resistance is great. I think everyone should use it. Plyometrics and rebounders. So plyometrics are not for everyone. I will absolutely say that if you're an at-risk population, if you have concerns of falling, things like that, you don't need to be jumping and bouncing around. Most people well into their 70s or even 80s can do some form of plyometrics though. So if you picture a box jump onto a very low box. If you go to exercise classes where you have the plyometric steps, where you have risers and you put that plastic lid on top for a step, you just put that lid on the ground, it's 2 or 3 inches high, and you jump onto that. There are a lot of people that can do that, especially if you have it next to a wall with someone ready to assist you if you lose your balance. You can do that, and you'll be amazed at what a confidence booster that is. I've routinely seen this, and I've even seen this in myself. If I haven't done any plyometrics for, say, a couple years, it's intimidating. Even jumping on something low, it's like, I haven't left the ground. I haven't left Earth's orbit in a long time. This is nerve-wracking. But then you do it and you're like, oh, I can still do this. And it absolutely is a confidence booster. I've seen it in many clients over time. You do a little bit of jumping and all of a sudden you realize you can. And that makes you more confident, puts a little spring in your step. And it also is teaching your body to be more reactive. And that's the whole point of plyometrics, is they're quick. So you step wrong off a curb, you have this system where you can more easily catch yourself because you're used to these quick movements, these accelerations, these absorbing of impacts, which is part of muscle power. Now, the other tool I absolutely love, and I encourage everyone to use them when they can, is rebounders. Rebounders are just small trampolines. That's why I have this little image of that guy jumping there. Trampolines are fantastic for a lot of things. You're getting the acceleration of jumping, so that's a power. You're also getting the G-forces of landing, but it's not a hard impact. It's a slow kind of cushioned impact. So you're getting lots of G-forces, and that's improving your force absorption, which is another component of muscle power. If you're not holding on, and by all means, if you haven't been on a rebound or anything in 10 years, 20 years, whatever, hold on, be safe. But if you are comfortable or have been practicing and you can do a trampoline without holding on, it's fantastic for your balance, because the trampoline is not just pushing you straight up. It's also, depending on where you land, it might be pushing you slightly to the left, slightly to the right. You might be landing more on your right foot than your left foot. There's all these minor perturbations that your body has to absorb and manage that are very, very beneficial for your balance. So rebounders are great for power. They're great for force absorption. They're great for balance and coordination. I've even seen research out of NASA. They've used them on the space station to maintain bone mass density. If you strap someone to a band harness and have them jump on a trampoline, it's stimulating bone mineral density. So they're very good for that too, because of those G forces with the impact. So there's a lot of benefits to plyometrics and rebounders. And I saw a study recently that it was very short intervals. It was 100 jumps 5 times a week. So 100 jumps, I don't know what that takes you, maybe 45 seconds, a minute, something, 5 times a week over a period of 6 weeks. And people had marked measurable improvement of their VO2 max, which is your cardiovascular fitness. They had improvement of their muscle power. They had improvement of their jump height, their vertical height. So I wouldn't say there's anything particularly magic about rebounders and trampoline, but they are a very useful tool that works a lot of different things at once. So I absolutely encourage you, if you're doing that machine circuit at the Y, like I mentioned above, throw a little rebounder in there. Make sure you're safe. Make sure you got a spotter at first if you're not sure. But build up these capacities because it has a lot of carryover. There's also, and you see the citation here, there's a study I read, power-focused resistance training, which is integrating these things, as I mentioned. Oh, I forgot to mention balance. Balance work, very, very important. As I mentioned, in terms of physical capacities, it's the second fastest physical capacity that we lose over time. Second to muscle power is balance. The good news is it's very easy to build your balance. You just have to spend time balancing. At first, especially if your balance has suffered from neglect for a long time, just work on standing on one foot. Stay somewhere where you can hold on to things. Stay somewhere safe, and just work on 30 seconds per leg is typically where I start people. I make sure to do these barefoot because I want all the muscles in your feet engaging. I want your toes spread out and kind of catching you like stabilizers. I want your arch having to pop up and work. because your feet and your ankles are a quarter of the joints in your body. You want them strong, you want them functional. But just start 30 seconds per leg, holding on. If 30 seconds is too much, start with 15. Start where you are. And then as you improve, the way I like to integrate balance work with all my clients is anytime we're doing some kind of smaller single joint exercise, like say dumbbell curls for your biceps, also have them do it on one leg, or lateral raises for your shoulders. Anything like that, or resting between sets. Let's say you're doing some sets of leg press on the leg press machine and you're resting a minute or two. Do 30 seconds on each leg of balancing in between that. It's going to be harder because your legs are tired, but that doesn't bother me. Hard is actually okay. Hard is good for you. But you start to build that up and make sure you're hitting balance regularly. It's a skill, just like playing an instrument or something, and regular routine repetitions of balance practice make it improve really, really quickly. So make sure you're getting that almost every day, or at least every time you exercise, if you're formally exercising, get that in and find ways to integrate it. Stand on one foot while you're brushing your teeth, stand on one foot, you're waiting in line. Very simple ways to do that. And it improves quickly, and that's going to also improve all your other capacities as well, because better balance means you can generate more force, more muscle power, maintain more muscle mass. And so all these things feed into each other, as I mentioned before. And as I was saying before I got to that point and had to backtrack a second, is power-focused resistance training, which is using just the first method of acceleration on the concentric phase, proved effective in older adults. It was safe and effective. There was no higher injury risk than regular strength training with a steady pace. It was just as effective for improving muscle mass and power, and it improved physical function more than traditional training. And they were measuring balance, standing on one foot, and the sit to stand test, where how fast can you get out of a chair. So people gained just as much strength, just as much muscle mass. It was just as safe, but they improved their function a little bit better. To me, that's a huge win. That argues that everyone should be doing this as a default right there until we know better.